Another G5 head coach the Bruins should go after is Dan Mullen.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson. Yoxheimer, thanks for making this show your first listening to every day. It's free where we get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. We're joined by Jason Kelly. We're running again, the host of the Let's Run podcast. Of course, he knows just about everything UNLV. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, putting and pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. So stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. And we're moving today. Is Dan Mullen the guy? What's the backstory? What's the knowledge? 2, what are his strengths and weaknesses? Is it likely? And finally, we'll dive into UCLA's current interim head coach and what can he do for UCLA against Northwestern, which is very much a winnable game, one of a couple left for UCLA in this 2025 season. So, Jason, let's get right to it. Tell me what you liked from Dan Mullen. UNLV is 4-0. I think UNLV is the most overrated 4-0 team in the country. Hit me with it.
We are 4-0, though.
You were smacking UCLA. So, you were in UCLA, so I can't talk about that. But, let's be real. UCLA, a win over UCLA is not going to get you to the playoff.
No, and honestly, in terms of UNLV, I posted a meme after we were down 14 points 3 separate times to Miami of Ohio, and I posted the Jack Sparrow meme where it's like, you've got to be the worst pirate I've ever heard of, but you have heard of me. And I was like, you got to be the worst 4-0 team I've ever heard of. And I was like, but you've heard of us.
So, and hey, there's been teams, maybe not of UNLV's level, but there have been teams where you're like, how is this team unbeaten? And then they just go further into the season and old school, they made the BCS Bowl, made a New Year's Six Bowl, maybe in this day and age can make a playoff, whatever that team could be. I don't think UNLV is that team, but it is quite remarkable that Dan Mullen's kind of picked up the pieces, a lot of new faces, and they're unbeaten against the schedule they have. Let's see what they have against the Mountain West. What do you think Dan Mullen has done so far to pick up from Odom leaving to Purdue?
So, we lost our entire staff. Not our entire staff. There are a few guys that stayed over from Barry Odom to Dan Mullen. And Dan Mullen brought on people that weren't experienced. It's called both our offensive and defensive coordinator. Now, our defensive coordinator, it's because Zach Arnett was supposed to be our defensive coordinator, and he allegedly was found naked at a Wendy's drive-thru in Las Vegas at 2 a.m, and that's why he's no longer our defensive coordinator during the offseason. That was a great story. Still not sure if it's true, but nobody's really ever denied it. And then our offensive
That's a
coordinator,
meal of misfortune for sure.
The Baconator, when it calls, you got to answer.
Not that way.
Yeah, so our offensive and defensive coordinator are both first-time coordinators. We have 55 new players. We returned the fewest amount of starters in the FBS, and we're 4-0. And I think that speaks to Dan Mullen. He is kind of holding together this ship. He's the cartoon character that's trying to plug all the leaks in a first-year team that, by all accounts, when you lose that much, really should be struggling a bit more. And we are struggling, but we're still winning. And ultimately in college sports, you are your record. I do believe that, actually. If you're a 1-0 team, okay, that means you're a 1-0 team. If you're a 6-0 team, that means you're a 6-0 team. And obviously
you're 0-3, you're 0-3.
Yeah, and your schedule, gets taken into account a little bit. Florida's playing a brutal schedule, but does that mean people aren't angry at Billy Napier? No. So, and I think that speaks to Dan Mullen as this guy's got a ton of experience, man. He won over 100 games in the SEC as a head coach, multiple New Year's Six Bowl appearances and wins. Head coach at Florida, which is maybe, post Urban Meyer, Florida is maybe one of the most difficult jobs in America. And he did get fired from that job, but not a lot of people in Florida are like, wow, well, we upgraded with Billy Napier. And so Dan Mullen is a professional. He knows how to run a football program. He knows how to build a football program. Mississippi State, that's their golden era with him. And at 4-0, frankly, I couldn't be, there are certainly things that I want fixed. And you saw a lot of them in that second half versus when UCLA played here in Las Vegas. But I think he's a very good head coach. He's a consummate professional. And he's a very good, which I think is important for UCLA, he's an outstanding offensive coach. Our defense, I don't know if it could stop a wet napkin, but our offense can score. If you take the chains off the offense, they can put up some serious points. And even though we have a weakened roster, if you have a good offensive head coach, you have something. You can put butts in seats. You can sell tickets. Mm-hmm. And even if we're ultimately going to be a 9-3, 8-4 team that started off kind of hot and then took some rough losses, here in Vegas, after losing everything that we lost when Barry Odom left for Purdue, I think we're pretty happy about it. And Mullen's a great coach. So I can understand why he's a target for UCLA. And I'm sure, if we have a dream season, he won't only be a target for UCLA. There may be other schools that are interested in taking him as well. And that makes total sense.
The funny thing, too, he's probably one of the few guys that won't be wooed by the Florida job.
No, he will not be returning to Gainesville. No, yeah.
I mean, there's so many coaches. If they're interested in the SEC, if they want to go across the coast, wherever, go in the South. And, Florida is not I would think. Now, there's been coaches who have returned, but you don't really get fired. You don't move along. You don't move on and just go like that. So him going to Florida, again, obviously, is not really an option. So that's kind of a blessing in disguise if UCLA wants to take kind of a flyer on this guy. I think it's a tough situation for UCLA if they're going to take, a unique look at Mullen out of the game a little bit, commentating, and then back into coaching. And I'm not sure. I feel like Mullen's in a situation where prove it to me for 2 years. So I'm not sure it matches up with UCLA, but he also is in a situation where if this team overachieves in UNLV this year, someone's going to be willing to offer him a job. Could that be Oklahoma State, who might overpay him? Could that be Virginia Tech? Would that be UCLA? I'm not sure that would be disappointed. It's not a bad fit in my mind. But you could get stuck with a guy who might need a couple of years to get everything fixed, adjusted to the NIL, rev share, what that looks like, make sure the universities are making the right choices in those decisions. And maybe he sits pat for an extra year.
Yeah, and I would just ask, how many candidates that have been brought up for UCLA, because Dan Mullen has been legitimately brought up, how many of them have that many New Year's Six wins? How many of them were how many have the resumes of Dan Mullen?
Not many.
Not very many. Dan Mullen, even coming to UNLV, the fact that at UNLV, here's the way I feel like we kind of saw it in Vegas when we signed him. We understand that he did say in a press conference, I'm planning on being here next year, but coaches are fickle, just like players, and you never know. But the fact that we got him to sign the dotted line at all was the win. Keeping him was never, when you're a rising program, especially in the G5, you just have to understand that your coaches are going to be taken.
It's like players in sometimes you get that super 4-star, you get that rising 3-star, and then they go somewhere else and then they win the Heisman, right? Because those guys are not going to win the Heismans at the UNLVs, at the Fresnos of the world. They're going to go take that next step. And Curtis Rourke, Heisman candidate Indiana, right? After playing a few years in a G5, then boom, Heisman candidate. It's like that next step. And sometimes the stepping stone is, hey, this is an opportunity to be successful. We see that all the time in college. Utah State in college basketball is kind of a good little reference there. They go to the tournament every year. They played UCLA. They've been churning out coaches, and that's not a bad thing. But UCLA wants to get the right guy when it comes to, who's the next guy that's going to pop out of this school? Would it be a Dan Mullen? He's probably one of the more accomplished head coaches. That's a reasonable ask. I could go throw some crazy names, and I certainly will and might, but Dan Mullen is well within reason. And is it, Jason, within asking price possibly for UCLA when it comes to contract?
So I guess if you want to jump into Dan Mullen's contract,
the buyout,
Yeah, so Dan Mullen, he's making $3.5 million a year at UNLV, which for the G5 is an outstanding contract for a G5 head coach.
It's an outstanding number for UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad number at all. So it's a $17.5 million salary, and he has a bunch of bonuses as well that he can make on top of all of this. The big obstacle that I see for Dan Mullen to UCLA is the buyout number. UNLV was this is part of the reason why I say that UNLV won at life the minute that Dan Mullen signed his name to that piece of paper. There's a $7 million buyout. In fact, I think it's closer to $7.5 million buyout if Dan Mullen leaves UCLA for a Power 4 job. If he leaves for a non-Power 4 job, it's a $5 million buyout. But, that's a big buyout for a G5 program. That's actually that's a pretty high number to get a coach to commit to. And that's not saying that that's an impossible now. UCLA absolutely could, pay $7 million if you have a bunch of big donors kind of get together. But is that the best value that you're going to get? That's kind of my big hindrance with this.
Not year one, Dan Mullen at UNLV. If it was year two and he's done it back-to-back years, a playoff and a New Year's Six bowl or a decent bowl and then a playoff, I would be like, let's do it. This is the perfect time. He can expand his resources at the next spot, and this could potentially be home. But I would think Oklahoma State would be more likely to do something like that than UCLA when it comes to spending someone who's proven, someone who's kind of been in the area, kind of recruiting that neck of the woods. UCLA it'd be an interesting fit, which we'll dive into and talk his strengths and weaknesses next on Locked On UCLA. But that number, that's rough for a year one buyout. And we'll talk more about it on Locked On UCLA. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered. Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. And for Indiana, you have to go with Fernando Mendoza. Think about the Hoosiers who went out, did it, and took down Illinois. UCLA, we want to be like Indiana. And hey, Fernando Mendoza went out and dominated. No hesitation, no delay. He's already proved it before, and that's what he did with Indiana. If you've been watching Mendoza week after week, got his chance to shine, and he did. So it's no fluke with Mendoza being on a streak. And just like Fernando Mendoza, who delivered for Indiana, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays, and with DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stacking up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Let me tell you about this. New customers can bet just $5. $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I don't know why you haven't taken advantage of this. $5 if you're a new customer, and if it wins, $300 to use across the app. All right, and you can use it to bet however you like, whether it's same-game parlays, player props, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. That makes every game more exciting, even if you're just watching your fantasy lineup. Make it more exciting. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, we're diving in. Is it likely? Is there a strength and weakness we should like about Dan Mullen, not like about him? All right, Jason, let's get right into it. What are the strengths? You've talked about him being an offensive head coach. Is he like to throw it around? Can he run it? They've been very strong scoring points. What's the scoop?
Yeah, so Dan Mullen, he has a spread offense that he runs. He's a quarterback whisperer. I mean, like Tim Tebow, Dak Prescott. These are Dan Mullen's guys, like if you look at some of the great quarterbacks that have come through the college ranks, like their names are tied to Dan Mullen. He was Urban Meyer's number 2. Like this guy is an offensive guru. He actually is. And, you give him California, you give him the city of Los Angeles. What kind of scoring could he put up in the Rose Bowl? I think that he could do a really good job, actually. I think he could light up the scoreboard. Now, is this team going to play great defense? That depends on his resources for a defensive coordinator. But his strength is absolutely, he's got an aura to him. He lights up the room whenever he walks into it. Like, he is awesome. This is one of my favorite things about him in Las Vegas. He is so good with the donors. He is so good at activating the money. Now, we're a G5 program. We have not been investing in football for very long. And so, developing new relationships with new donors is something that he's working on and doing a really good job on. It's something that Barry Odom did before him. And developing UNLV into a program that's bigger than an individual coach. But by all accounts, the media loves him. Everybody's obsessed. His press conferences are some of the most entertaining that I've ever seen as a fan. And he puts points on the board. So I think that Mullen, if you walk into a room and you throw out your New Year's Six Bowl appearances and you throw out the resume of the quarterbacks that you've listened to, there's very few people in all of the world of football that can put his resume on a table and says, listen up, time to watch some football games.
And that's a fascinating thing, too, because UCLA needs like that guy who's personable, who can come in and be a little gregarious. I keep using that word, but that's what UCLA kind of needs, like a Coach Eck from New Mexico, like insert name coach. And the thing you mentioned, you need that guy who can activate the money. That's like a perfect term that nobody's ever talked about when it comes to UCLA and the institutional crisis it's been facing as an athletic department from the chancellor position down in years past. Now they have a chance to fix all that. And even if this guy, whoever comes next, is only a 2-year guy or a 5-year guy, or if he's a lifer, then you need somebody who's going to activate the money. Because if you start getting people to pay and bring in money, whether it's the ticket sales, the excitement from ad revenue, NIL, and then bring it in more, hopefully with, the rev share in the right department, and then you get the donors to pay more, all of a sudden, even if it's not the right hire for 4 to 5 years, if it's exciting, people are more likely to spend. And that's something that, activate the money is a fun term.
Yeah. And like Deshaun Foster, bless him, he was a good guy. I mean, I think he was trying his best. But when he walks in the room, like there's a lot of people that go, okay, whatever. Like, who is this kid? Even though he was a very accomplished man, people, I don't think, respected him. And it's not that he didn't deserve respect. People deserve to give him a shot. But Dan Mullen can walk into a room and say, hey, Urban Meyer's calling. One sec. Let me talk to him. Dan Mullen can be like, hey, here's my friend Tim Tebow. Let's sit down. Let's talk about, like he can do that kind of stuff. And it's been a revelation at UNLV. And obviously, like, our roster still needs work. And, it's a G5 program. And Mariota really took a lot when he left. He really did. And fair enough, that's his right to do. And I wish him the best at Purdue. I hope that when in your future matchups versus Purdue, whenever they may be, I hope that you destroy that you beat him, although I do like Barry. But Dan Mullen, he's got a charisma to him. And I think that UCLA could.
Would you say he has
strength.
Riz?
Yeah, totally. You should, I don't know if you weren't there, but his like our like pregame intro video is him like in a suit standing in front of a microphone. It's the coach saying it's showtime. He is willing not just to say, oh, I'm just going to be a ball coach. Just going to sit here, coach speak, like the boring crap that you hear from guys like, as a BYU fan, Kalani Sitake, man, he coach speak up the wazoo, never says anything. Dan Mullen will say stuff. He'll be like, we're not good at this. We're not good at this. We need to be better at this. He's direct and he knows that money talks. And so I really think he's a great coach. And I think he could do, I think his strengths, and we can get into his weaknesses a little bit here, but his strengths far outnumber his weaknesses. And I think he could do a very good job connecting with the people of UCLA. Now, I don't know if he's the perfect fit in Los Angeles, but I think he could do a great job. So his strengths are numerous and really profound. I actually think he's an awesome coach.
Are you a salesman, Jason? Because, man, I want Dan Mullen. Let's sign it up. Let's go. Sign it up. I'm done. I'm done. No more. I mean, there's plenty to talk about in terms of coaching names. You did bring up the buyout, which is a little bit of a problem. But, man, you've got me sold. Now hit me with the weaknesses. Tell me, hurt me. What's it going to take beyond just the buyout? What's the weak spot of Dan Mullen?
Well, the weak spot is that you worry, like, is his like heart in it completely? Because he just, he had that terrible experience at Florida. He's definitely an East Coast guy. Like, we don't believe he's long-term in Vegas, and that's fine. Like, we're a G5 program. Like I said before, coaches are going to come, coaches are going to go. We have to be bigger than a coach. But I think that he has allegiances to the East Coast. I think he has allegiances to the South. He's an SEC guy. And ultimately, like, and I wonder sometimes he was very, he play called for a lot of his career, and he was very happy to be like, hey, Corey Dennis, first year play caller, here you go. I'm just going to say, he was very happy to delegate that responsibility. And so it's like a balance, do you want a guy that's going to be like, I'm calling the plays and we're doing this and we're, or do you want a guy that's a little more laid back? And I think that it's still a little early in the time at UNLV to know if his new style, having taken 3 or 4 years off, having been away from the game, having been in broadcasting, if his new style is going to translate to a dominant program at the G5 level, because UNLV absolutely can and should be a very dominant level, a very dominant program at the G5 level. So I think that there's still a little bit of like, okay, let's see how this actually works when we're not playing Idaho State, when we're not playing a UCLA team that was about to fire its head coach, when we're not playing Miami of Ohio, whose quarterback got hurt in the second quarter. So there's still a little bit of like, oh, okay, let's wait and see with Dan Mullen, which I think is fine, because when you take time off, there's going to be a bit of trepidation as you come back into the game.
I think for me, what I'm hearing is the fact that he's the right, exciting, fun guy. He'll score points and fix that part for UCLA, Nico or no Nico. And then the problem is it might just lead to a max of 7-5, 8-4, where sometimes even if you're a seasoned veteran, you sometimes need a moment to get back in it, right? Sometimes you're like, I need to go through that roughs patch. How do I respond? And how do I galvanize the troops? Because he doesn't need to go 12-0 to prove everybody right. He doesn't need to go 11-1 to win a playoff game. Doesn't need to have Boise's type of season, have Genty running for a Heisman potential. He just needs to be like, I can prove I can coach and show that with more resources, I can win. And I've been winning here. And been winning here isn't shown in a year. It is not. It's not. And that's where I think the 2 years and the timing might be a little off. And you mentioned the big buyout numbers. He's got a good contract, but that's a huge buyout, which proves UNLV and Dan Mullen, I think, are proven we need 2 years. And he probably wasn't expecting to be 4-0 right away.
I don't know. We had a pretty favorable schedule. I think we felt confident about that UCLA game, even though I picked against UNLV in that UCLA game, but that was more a belief in Nico than, than like a doubting us. My opinion about it is, and this, I guess, is it even likely? Is this possible? Like if UNLV goes 11-1 or 12-0 and goes to the college football playoff, Dan Mullen's not going to go to the UCLA job. He's going to try and go to a better job than what UCLA is right now. And that's no disrespect to UCLA. And if he goes 9-3 even, or 8-4 or 7-5 with a $7 million buyout, there's just better candidates, after a year one Dan Mullen at UNLV, especially because the buyout goes down next year. So I think it's just a timing thing. I think Dan Mullen's actually a great candidate for UCLA. And I just don't know that the timelines line up correctly enough, because if he's great, he's going back to the SEC. He's going back to a really resource heavy school and maybe the Big 12, but I think probably the SEC or the Big 10. That's his goal, I think, to go back there. And if he's not great, then you don't want him. So it's like, it's a catch-22. I don't think that
like he's been exciting enough, enticing enough. Like, he's showing off all the good things, like the little cat and mouse game. Like, I like what you're putting out right now, but what happens when we get to test your character in terms of as a UNLV coach, right? Not his actual character, but like when we actually get to see something when they go through a rough patch, as they continue to say, and see what happens. Because 4-0 is fun. That's fun to talk to. But what actually happens when they look 7-5, 8-4, 9-3? Is it 3 blowouts? Are they competitive? Or are they just a piece or two away, right? Is it become, was it a preseason incident that changes everything down the line? I like it. But if UCLA is, again, this is going to come down to if they're a real program and they say Dan Mullen is the guy, $8 million shouldn't stop it. It seems like it's a little too much for me for a year one Dan Mullen. I think that's fair to say. I think we can both agree, Jason. That's a lot to pay unless he goes 12-0 and wins a playoff game. I don't see that happening.
And if he goes 12-0 and wins a playoff game, I think
I think Florida would take him back. I think Florida would be like,
they
sorry.
Might, yeah.
I really don't think so. But hey, you never know.
And if you want to pay us $8 million to take him, that's part of the reason why we signed the contract. Go right ahead. We'll take the money. Please.
And then UNLV use that money to go sign some other coach to a contract.
And then we'll go take Jason Eck, and you guys can have ultimately I just don't think the timing's right, but I still think he's a good candidate, and I still think he should deservedly be on the list.
He should definitely be right around the short list, but cut off because of the timing. Like, he should be there, quality and qualified. He has all the qualifications. But just, it's not the right time. You think of like your dream coaches. He's there. He's not on your Mount Rushmore, but he's just like right off the edge that if the numbers work right and then you see the right things, and if he says the right things, he might be at UCLA. But you need somebody who's going to be there for the long haul at the Bruins. And even if Dan Mullen does come to UCLA, maybe from what you're saying, I don't get the vibe that he's going to stay there 10 years. He would stay there 5 years max, and it'd be a fun peak or an 8-4 max. Which maybe UCLA needs to get another attractive coach. Yeah,
and I would just say that, like, unless he's going to UCLA and saying, I want to be your head coach, I just don't think there's a reason to spend $8 million on him. And it's just timing. It's not because he's not a great option. It's just timing, like you said.
And some of this coaching stuff is timing. But UCLA did that to themselves by not firing Chip Kelly and then not going after in the coaching process when there was a lot of good coaches in 23 and 24 open. Maybe they could have coaxed Dan Mullen to come back. Be like, hey, forget broadcasting. Come out here. They could have had him earlier for cheaper. I don't know. Or they could have had, Jonathan Smith, Jed Fish, any of those guys who are open and available in that offseason. Instead, now you're here, and there's guys who have signed contracts that are 1 to 2 years in and are like, don't really think that's an opportunity. And maybe we'll throw out crazy names, which we will. It just does not seem, we're on the same page, Jason. It does not seem likely. But Dan Mullen is certainly a guy that he should be called. They should contact his people. His people should say, I'll take a flyer. Don't think it'll end up working. I don't think so.
I agree.
Now, if that number was 3.5 year one, I think UCLA should be like, hey, maybe we take a look at it, but not after a 7.5, 8 million year one buyout. That's not worth it.
I just don't think it's a value proposition. I think that there are other candidates that you could talk to. And it's not that he's not a good candidate. Like I said, it's just how you want to get good bang for your buck.
That's 8 million or 7 million you're putting in the hole just to get somebody who I think still would need another year to prove something, where if he was a little cheaper, it doesn't have to prove as much.